All right. Um, so here we are. Let's get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I see we have um, a number of attendees that are still coming in the door. So please take a seat, and feel free to sit in the front row. I guess everybody's in the front row in Zoom. Um, so that's great. So nice to see all of you. We have two great guests with us today, and I will be introducing them in a moment. Maybe we'll wait just a minute to. All right. So I think we're good. We'll get started. And so before we start, uh, I wanted to start by leading a moment of silence to honor the victims of injustice and to honor the all the casualties of Louisiana's health crisis. And so we want to start by leading a moment of silence, and we'll start that. We'll start that now. Okay. Um, Thank you, everybody. Um, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and so we're definitely sensitive to that. Today, we want to focus on something that is, something that's exciting and something that's interesting. We're going to speak about careers in coding, and how what are all the options out there. We have two great panelists who have really interesting stories to share with you. And so let me go ahead and do a quick introduction, and then I will ask them to also give us a bit of an introduction to themselves. And so I'm going to start with the harder name to pronounce. So um, forgive me if I don't do a good job of this, Ian. But so first we have Ian Uriarte, who is the founder and CEO of Timbergrove, and uh, and so Ian is a LSU alum, and also an immigrant to the United States, and I'm sure he'll be happy to share his story, and has had a long journey in the world of engineering broadly, and also software engineering, and working in various different industries, across the South. And so we'll let Ian share his story in a bit, and then along with Ian in the orange background, we have Brian Rodriguez, who so Brian is the founder and president of GatorWorks, and he is based out of he's based out of Baton Rouge, and also a LSU alum, proud LSU alum, even though the name of his company has a different mascot on it, but we'll let him explain that if he wants to. And so, yeah, we're happy to have Brian here. He's GatorWorks has been his company that he founded almost 20 years ago now, and it works directly in web development and software broadly as well. And so we'll let him share his story. But maybe let me start with Ian. If you could give us a few minutes about your background, Ian, and just kind of introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure, thanks. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Ian Oriarte. I'm a founder of Timber Grove. Graduated in LSU, what it seems to be a century ago, which literally was last century, right? 1995 graduate. I'm an electrical engineer turned into software engineer, turned into consultant, and then turned into entrepreneur. You know, that's basically that's the tagline, I would say. Originally from Honduras, immigrated to US. My family came before I did. And spent a few months in New Orleans learning English first. And then I took the English second language sufficiency, right? The ESL exam. And went to LSU, finished there. Then I did a short stint at the University of Houston Clear Lake in software engineering as well. Which I left unfinished. And then I've done some work as well. Very recently I went to a boot camp to get updated in my skills, for front end development, because there's a whole other world out there when I was developing, many moons ago. And so, so that's very general, right? So that's a high level career in oil and gas, and then I did software consulting for a while in software development services. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. I think we'll take that. Thank you. A lot of interesting things to dig into there. But Brian, would love to hear an intro from you.
Sure. So first, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to join the conversation tonight. So I started GatorWorks as actually a high school student in New Orleans. That was in 2001. Went to LSU. Kept the business going through those years, 02 to 06. Got my degree in the College of Business in ISDS, Information Systems and Decision Sciences. And in May of 06, got my degree, took a few days off, and then just got right back at it. So, built our company really focusing on website design and development for a number of years. And of course, that's still a big part of what we do. However, about 5 or 6 years ago, we really got into digital marketing in a big way, in search engine optimization and the management of Google ad campaigns and everything that goes along with that. Targeted display now is a big piece of what we do. And so that's really what allowed our company to grow. In 2017, our GatorWorks was acquired by a local diversified company, mostly in radio is what they do, is kind of their main business line. But we were acquired in the fall of 17, and it was a great situation. I'm still the president of the company, and we're small. We have 23 employees total, including myself. So, and for a number of years, we only had around 10 employees. So just in the last 18 months, we've experienced significant growth, and it's been a really interesting ride kind of navigating that. But yeah, so I look forward to kind of digging in and joining the conversation tonight.
Great. Thank you both for your introduction. I will dive right in with an interesting question. I think that's directly related to what we're discussing today, which is, everybody tells us about this skills gap in tech, right? That like there's a high need, and it's hard to find people who are qualified for the positions that you're looking for. Is that real? Is there really a skills gap? Have you both experienced difficulties in finding engineering talent and hiring engineering talent?
I can tell you my experience. Brian, if you can go first, up to you.
Go for it.
Yeah, thanks. I think that there is certain shortage, right? I think that every year the market gets saturated, and then it gets pretty scarce. I think there is a like life in itself, right? It cycles, right? You have seasons. I think it happens. It has to do a lot with the economy, I think, and what whether big companies are hiring or not, whether there's a boom in business, then there's usually a need for resources. It all depends on what type of people you're looking for. There's always, I feel, a steady supply of freshly, newly minted, software engineers that you can take from the streets and train, in specific technologies, right? But the issue is getting talent that comes with a certain degree of, with a baseline knowledge that is enough for you as an entrepreneur to not have to start almost from scratch, right? I think that's for me the biggest
Yeah.
thing. Or finding like really senior developers, right? That so at that point, obviously, it's a problem of a pipeline, right? If there were not enough initially at the beginning, there will not be enough later on in the senior years, and so. I
Yeah.
think that the scarcity comes on the senior side more than in the newly minted developers. That's my experience so far.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. Is that if there's only one path to senior, and it passes through junior.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And like, yeah,
grueling. There's a grueling path. Yeah.
yeah. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah. So, we've seen a lot of the same from kind of what you're saying, Ian. We find that if we can bring someone in that that has more of the intangibles and that has fits in our culture, clearly shows that they have the ability to learn, the initiative, the drive, they want to learn. Then a lot of times we'll try to bring them on pretty green and train them up. We just haven't had a whole lot of success bringing on more senior level developers. So it's served us well. Kind of, I guess 6 or 7 years ago, we brought on kind of 2 sort of mid-level developers who have then become, well experienced and have the ability to then train some of the newer guys and gals. So that's been kind of our approach.
Yeah, I'm glad that both of you brought up those 2 perspectives. We do hear that a lot of times employers that hire out of our programs, a lot of times they'll say is that entry level developers, they understand that they're not going to be just experience, like super experienced and senior yet, right? But they're hiring them for their ability to work in the team together, for the ability to learn quickly, to have a just like and somebody who is not a kind of set in their way of how to do things. In fact, that's actually a criticism of senior developers, is that they come in with a pretty strong mindset about what they want to do. And a lot of times, if your company already has processes, there can be some cultural problems. And so, I've heard that as well, that some companies like to mentor junior developers onto senior themselves. And obviously that said, I think what Ian said is right too, which is, I think senior developers, when they get there, they can solve problems very quickly. They have, they just have the years of experience to also be able to mentor other developers, which I think is very important as well. Do you guys see that in the way that you're looking at hiring now, has your in the post-COVID world, has your way of looking at who you're hiring, where you're hiring them, what kind of skills you're looking for, like has all that changed, or is it, do you expect it to still, after we're all back, kind of, it seems like things are opening up, like, do you think this is a short-term change?
Yeah, so I'll say for us, for years, I was very big on having an in-house team that worked, at our office in our building in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I was just really big on that. I felt like, growing a culture, and, I sort of wanted this base of people that you can just walk into the other room and go to their workstation and solve a problem. I'll say the COVID situation has definitely opened our eyes a bit, and has been kind of nudging our leadership team towards being way more open to remote in team members. Right now we have one remote employee who's a designer who's, she's been with us for about 5 years, and she relocated up to Madison, Wisconsin. And she's been kind of our first test case for the last probably 8 to 10 months. But as you guys know, our entire company went remote overnight. And so we're really talking about, okay, do we need to be in an office, and what would it do to the talent pool when you open up across the country and you can recruit for any, so it's almost like, wait a second, why haven't we done this already? So we're very much looking at as we grow to bring on people in other locations. And also, I don't know if now's the time, so maybe we can circle back to it, but also have some thoughts on kind of what we're just other effects that we think COVID has had, and kind of, what we're seeing. So, but I'll let Ian hop in.
Yeah, thanks. Similar. I mean, we, small company, we have had a little bit of more of a kind of hybrid culture. I do like the ability to have the team local because, we spend a lot of time going eat Tex-Mex and drinking margaritas. I mean, to be very honest, that's what we do. Or go get a barbecue, right?
I miss that.
Get ramen, and just take it back to the office. And we have a very big open space. It's fun, right? And so, with that said, half of our team, we're 15. We're slightly smaller than you, Brian. And we have half of our team is overseas, right? So we have people in Singapore, Czech Republic, Spain, Costa Rica, Uruguay, in Toronto and Canada. And so we have the team is kind of, and this is those are not teams, those are people, right? Specific individuals working from there. And most of them have been with us for at least 2 years. And then the team in Houston is 6 of us in Houston, and our CTO who's in Buffalo, New York. And so we already in the local office had people, one of our senior developers, she wanted to start working from home 100%, although we already work 2 days a week from the office, from remote, and 3 in the office. She wanted to move full time. I said, there's no reason why you can't. And so, she before the COVID hit, she was already working from home full time. And so, and we're in the same spot, right? Like, why do we have to pay for expensive office when we're probably not going to be using it? We're going to keep it a little longer because, kind of wait and see type of situation. Especially because we also work with hardware, because we do a lot of IoT stuff. And so sometimes we need the benches, and, we have a ton of tools and equipment that we need to use to build sensors and hardware, but it's very similar to what Brian was saying.
Yeah, I think I've heard that as well from friends who are in hardware companies that, the conversation is just very different. In fact, one of my friends who's at Apple, they actually finally just decided to buy all the engineers kind of a lot of the lab equipment so that they can set it up at home, which is expensive. Some of that equipment is very expensive, but they just realized that, otherwise all their timelines are getting backed up. I think we already heard of some Apple products getting delayed in launch. So, but that, like, going back to the remote work idea, I think, so our program at LSU is fully online and anybody can take it. And I think what I've always thought is that the rise of online, it really puts a lot of flexibility and power in the hands of an employee who can, is not forced to live in a specific location to access tech jobs. And I think especially, like, I grew up in Owensboro, Kentucky, and we didn't have any tech companies over there, right? And so, I mean, I think it would be incredible if, I knew so many smart people and so many ambitious and, people who would love to be in a great industry, who live locally, that I think that this can give access to good jobs like everywhere, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yep.
Um, and so, what was I going to say? How do you, going back to the topic of your own uh, backgrounds, actually, like, so, we were talking earlier, and you both have very interesting stories and backgrounds, and I thought maybe it would add some nice context to kind of everything you're saying and your advice and experience. If you could, if you both could share a little bit more about your journey. I know you gave like a really brief intro, but maybe it's worth dedicating a little more time. I know you both have really interesting stories.
Sure. Brian, you want to go first?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So, so yeah, I when I first got started, it was definitely a case of I didn't know what I didn't know, and it might have that might have been a good thing that I did not know what I was getting myself into. One of the key things I realized early on was that I personally was not a very good web designer, and I also was not a very good developer. And so what I did was I surrounded myself with very smart people, and I focused on my passion, which was really the business side of it. So it was, business development, creating relationships with clients, sort of the sales, kind of the sort of the thrill of learning about a new potential client, and then actually being able to close that piece of business and then build something for the client. It was very exciting for me to take part in that piece of it. So, I think my story is probably similar to lots of other entrepreneurs who those first few years were extremely just tough. Many my first few employees made more money than I did personally, and for years there, I kind of believed that eventually it would be successful and would grow, but for years it was really kind of grinding it out, and it. People kind of ask me, how did you do this and this and that, and really it's kind of cliche, but really it was sort of a just not giving up. I just outlasted a lot of other company. I just kept going, and I was those early years I had a very I guess simple quality of life. I think right now it'd be a lot harder now that I have a wife and two kids and I'm kind of accustomed to certain things. I think coming out of college, it was kind of a beautiful thing. I didn't own anything, so that meant I had nothing to lose, and so I just kind of went for it. And so it's been a very rewarding career so far. I'm now, I guess this spring will be about 14 years post college that I've been doing this professionally, and had the opportunity to work with hundreds and hundreds of businesses across all different types of industries, and it's been really exciting. So, that's a little bit more of my story. So yeah, I'll let Ian hop in there.
Story. Yeah, it's very similar, and Brian is absolutely right. This is all about persistence. I have a family member that said that my superpower is to outlast everybody else, basically. Just stay there, stay the course. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
just I'm hard-headed, like I'm a bull, tell me I can do something, I'm gonna go for it, So I wish I started actually as young as you did, Brian. I went 12 years career at 13 actually year career after LSU before I started my company. I have it for 11 years. I've never been the better developer, the best developer. I think that I did the exact same thing. I learned early on that actually, as soon as I came out of LSU, I started working with really senior engineers, and within a year, I was made a project manager because I just could figure out how to solve the complexities of organizing a project and managing the communications with the client, right? It had nothing to do with my technical skill. I mean, I understood what we were doing. I couldn't do it on my own, And so I respected the seniority of these people that had 20, 25 years of experience. I listened to them, you know, and all I had to do is be able to work with them, right? A little verbal judo and and be able to help, you know, get out of the way and do what they needed to do to deliver the technical complex projects I was working with. And you know, that led into a really good career, you know, oil and gas, Baker Hughes, Varco. Then I did Sunger Energy, and then I went to work for IBM for 6 years before I started my own company. I did some coding. I was never much of a uh, coder, except for my early years in oil and gas, and it was mostly embedded systems, kind of like PLCs, embedded controllers, you know, data acquisition systems, kind of the stuff that now is coming back into the world of IoT, you know.
Yeah.
And then I work on really complex, you know, transactional systems, very heavy loaded. The one at Sunger was the largest online trading platform for energy commodities. And that was more architecture. I worked more on the architecture side, understanding MQTT, you know, how do you do queue management, web application basically made by hand when you know, when XML was not really XML yet, you know, and using Java, you know, to actually deliver that. So it was fun. I had a lot of fun, complex projects. And then that helped me understand that I needed always a really good team with me. And so that's kind of helped me overall, you know, grow the company and keep where we are. But I think that the
Nice.
key through all that was learning. I love learning, guys. I think that's the key. And I think that's probably, Brian is probably the same way. I would imagine you can't keep a business running if you are not learning new things, because you're having conversations with customers, and your conversations could be technical or it could be just business, but you have to basically understand the type of solution you're going to offer to the client before you even bring your technical team, right? Otherwise, you're wasting everybody's time, you know. And so, so learning constantly. This is why I went for a boot camp in 2018, because I thought, man, why am I having trouble communicating with these developers, these new developers? And I realized it wasn't them, it was me. And so I went for it, and I realized, man, the browser is now extremely complex. And these
Yeah.
technologies, you have a
And
full stack.
powerful.
Yeah, you have a full stack now on the glass, right, in the browser. So that's
Yeah.
okay. That makes perfect sense. So that's kind of the learning, and I think that's what boot camps fill in a tremendous void, because usually you don't get that in college, right? I mean, I went to LSU, I learned C++, C, you know, Pascal, a bunch of languages, but I never learned to make something useful with it. I mean, it's just you learn the principles, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that you know, university curriculums focus on computer science, which is a very interesting and fun subject to dive into on its own. But it is different than the practical application of building software for the public. It's just very different. And I actually went through a computer science curriculum in university, and it was very different. You know, today I think, Ian, you discovered this yourself in the boot camp, that the browser has become essentially as powerful as the operating system used to be. So you can write software basically for the browser in JavaScript, and that's why JavaScript itself is also so powerful now, that you know it's become like the main programming language of the browser. And what's incredible about the browser, even compared to Windows, Linux, Mac, is that everybody has a browser, no matter what operating system they're on, no matter what, even their phone, even your watch, a lot of times has a browser now. Um, and so yeah, I think it's interesting. I love to learn a little. Well, I have a couple of questions that came off from you know, both of your journeys. But Ian, one specific thing I find interesting is that I never hear about oil and gas and manufacturing, are, you know, as industries that are just, you know, they're never in TechCrunch or in these kind of technology publications and all that. And yet it seems that they are, you know, large industries that have tons of tech jobs and are probably, you know, they're probably digitizing their work at a rapid pace. How would somebody in the audience even look for work there? Would you even suggest that industry as something to look into?
Yeah, it's funny because when I went into oil and gas, I didn't think there was much technology there, to be very honest, right? I mean, a little bit of what I was told during the interviews, but once I went into it, I realized that especially when you're in what's called upstream, which is the drilling portion of it, right? Every well that is being drilled, offshore, when you're having a platform, whether it's a semi-submersible, a drill ship, anything like that, or even a jackup, that operation is like going to the moon. Every single one of them. When you're talking about drilling 30,000 feet, down, and usually sometimes over 10,000 feet of water, right? That's a very
Yeah.
difficult operation. There's tons of technology. Even back in the mid 90s, right? I mean, you're talking about, streams of data. Data is being passed from the bottom of a 30,000 feet drill string through the mud. So it's water, right? So it's pulses, right? It's what is called a puppet valve that is opening and closing. It sends you zeros and ones from the bottom of 30,000 feet, right? And so it's high tech that you really don't realize how high it is until you really get into it. And the ability to do a lot of analyzing on that data, reducing noise, cleaning the signal, all that was software,
Yeah.
some electronics at the bottom, but at the top is pure software, cleaning digital systems processing, digital signal processing. And so it's software. There's plenty of jobs in those industries. And what I learned is when I went into that industry, I did some of the hardware engineer portion, but my job was by probably the largest, 90% of my job during my 12-year career, it was actually in the software side. In oil and gas, I did about 6 of that. And
Wow.
it was always software. I mean,
That's surprising. I would think it's like a more hardware.
Yeah, no, it's very intensive on software. And the funny thing is that industry always had trouble finding good software engineers. And so if you are talented, you like software, you like to learn, you can apply those skills anywhere on oil and gas.
Interesting. Brian, have you encountered any of your clients being from that field? What are kind of the industries that a lot of your clients are from, especially around Louisiana?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, we've done so the type of work that we do in regards to web development. We kind of made a decision a few years back. Once we started to offer more and more digital marketing services, we decided to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, anything that's dev related, if we take on the project, it has to be a public facing marketing related project. So there must be some sort of public facing aspect to it, as opposed to some sort of back end system that's helping a company internally with some sort of process or something like that, which it sounds like is different from what it does. So all of our dev related projects are front end development. Typically they're custom WordPress websites. We went all in on WordPress about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Before that, we used all different types of technologies, which became very complicated to try to manage.
If you don't mind me saying that, it seems a little late to be going all in WordPress, given that it's been around for like 20 years.
Oh no, I know. Well, it was crazy. So I remember when we first started, we would do some WordPress stuff, but we always dabbled in all these other things. And we would say, oh, well, this next one, let's do something else. Let's, and this, and before you knew it, each year, back then, maybe we were making, 30 or 40 websites. But then you'd have 5 in WordPress. I remember we tried Joomla and all
Drupal probably. And
Drupal. And then we decided, oh, we'll just create our own content management system. And so before you knew it, from being able to support all these systems, it became a complete nightmare. So at some point we said, okay, the parameters are going to be, one, does the client need, does it fit into the bucket of, this is for the purposes of solving a marketing challenge for our company? So that's got to be one thing. And then the second is, basically you have to let us build it in WordPress, or we're just not going to be the right fit for you. So being able to kind of, be very clear about those two things really was a game changer, because then it allowed us to really become experts in that technology, and then to be able to, charge more for it, to be able to better set expectations with clients. There's all kinds of things that we were able to do once we did that. But as far as industries, really, we're kind of all over the place. On the digital marketing side, we have about 70 ongoing clients that we provide services for. There's a big healthcare piece of that. Technical colleges that we do a lot of work for. And then beyond that, it's all across the board. And then same with the websites. We design and develop about 30 to 35 websites a year right now, with a team of 4 developers and 4 designers. And yeah, they're all across the board. So engineering firms, law firms, some e-commerce, not a whole lot of e-commerce, but nonprofits and you name it. So it's been.
So you're not specializing in any one industry right now. You're sometimes I see firms that are really big on like one industry where they have a lot of connections and but
yeah, that's right, and that's been a big discussion at our company for a long time now, because typically if you don't specialize in a particular vertical, then a lot of times what companies like ours will default to is local. So then you end up trying to sell your geography to your client, which fine, but then scaling it beyond that geography obviously gets really tricky. So we're kind of going deep on a vertical is something that's very much on the table right now as we continue to grow.
Nice. By the way, I have all kinds of WordPress problems, Brian. So I'm glad I know somebody to call now, because my WordPress sites are always getting hacked. And so maybe I need to update my PHP, but
it's very powerful, very, very powerful.
Change your host. That's usually the problem.
I won't even. Yeah, my host has been the same since like the early 2000s. I do need to change it. But so Ian, I'm curious to hear more about your bootcamp experience. Like, what did you think about it? How did you feel as you were going through it? It's really cool that you have a position as somebody who is hiring developers and also as someone who's been through a bootcamp. A couple of years back, we had a gentleman who was a venture capitalist go through full stack, and he was running like a few $100 million fund, but he's like, I'm like funding all these really smart, interesting entrepreneurs, and I don't know what the hell they're talking about a lot of times. And so I just needed to get my hands dirty. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah, I think there were 2 reasons to do it. Well, first of all, I'm a curious cat, constantly trying to learn new things. And so one of the things that it was I was doing something. So one of our business partners is IBM, and we were working on a lot of stuff with natural language processing, and doing stuff with IoT, some predictive analytics, machine learning. And a lot of the APIs were in Python initially. Most of the APIs were being released in beta levels in Python. There was some stuff on Node, but most of the stuff was really in Python. It was like, or Java. Right? I haven't touched Java since 2000, I think. And so,
Same.
so I'm like, you know what? Let me see. And so this bootcamp that I had, they had Python in the first, I think it's first 3 weeks it was Python, and then they switched to JavaScript and then React. And so I thought, let's give it a try. And so, and I first of all fall in love with Python, right? It's a great language, easy to use. There's so many libraries, especially for that, data analytics, the things that you can do with it. It's machine learning is such a good language. And so because of that, I went in. Once the part become, about doing front-end development, I'm not a fan of CSS and all its complexities, right? All the HTML, I was like, that's not for me. And once we got into React, it's like, oh, you've got to be kidding me, right? So it's way more complex. But it helped me because that was where I was having the communication problem with my friend developers. So back in the day when I was architecting enterprise portals, what I was doing, we were doing it in the Java, enterprise Java, edition. And so that was it's a very different architecture. You had everything was done on the server, and the little bit of JavaScript that came in was spit out by the server into the browser, and the browser was so limited on what it could do. And so nowadays is the other way around. Is you have very little, you have an Angular application or a React application that downloads into your browser immediately. It's just like a file, right? Or a bunch of files actually, and it runs into the browser. And so you have a full stack, literally in your browser, and you're communicating, back and forth with the backend. You can still have this very complex architecture for middleware, all these tiers in the back end, but the front end is so complex now because what you're expecting, these devices have changed the world, right? And so these little things you have to, it's so much you can do on them that the browsers have to adapt to it, right? And so, and even in the screens, touch screens and everything. So that was the reason why I went for it. And I found it extremely useful. I think that, to be very honest, we have hired so we had maybe 12 interns in the last 3 years, 2.5 years, come from boot camps, and we have hired 8 people out of boot camps, and we're pretty happy. I mean, it's just been great. It's what Brian was talking about. It's like you get people kind of new, but with the basic tools, right? They know how to program, the basics, and then we kind of, they fit the culture, and then the rest is history, right? If they're self-motivated, I had an old boss used to say, you got to start with smart, and always said that. It's like, and so to me, smart really, it's not about IQ. It's about that sense of urgency, that curiosity, that desire to read, and learn, and spend time outside your work and outside your weekends. I mean, you're a geek, right? So you're a developer. Most of you're going to be a geek. You're going to be reading books. People are going to be looking at you. What are you doing? It's like, well, I like this stuff, right? And so
you gotta like it.
To spend time in your computer failing over and over and over and to figure out until you get it done. So it's
it sounds like CSS was hard, Ian.
Oh
like
my God!
You got it.
PTSD out of CSS, man.
when as you're telling me your troubles with CSS and React, as somebody who's taught those, I will just say one sentence to you, which is, the obstacle is the way, my friend.
The obstacle is the way, yeah.
So it's like, CSS is one of those things where it feels like voodoo in the beginning, but once you get more comfortable with it, you can actually be really powerful. And CSS nowadays can do so much inside CSS that you don't even need to write code for. And gone are the days when we used to have to do so many hacks in CSS just to get it working on all the browsers. So now at least, most of the browsers support the same code. So, but that's really interesting to hear. It's really cool to hear your story. That's really one thing that's common in boot camps, is that there's so many different ages of people, so many different types of people, all different genders, races, backgrounds, everything. And even career backgrounds too. Everybody from music to finance to, and almost anything in between. And I think what's really interesting is that that programming really connects your technical mind with your creative mind. And it kind of connects both of those together. And so it appeals to a lot of people. And it's satisfying to build something, right? It tickles both of your brains, like your technical brain and your creative brain. And I think, it's really satisfying. And so I want to switch topics a little bit. Brian, earlier you had mentioned that you wanted to add a little bit about, where you think tech is going in COVID. How are, post-COVID rather, I should say, how are tech companies doing? Where do you see this industry going?
Yes, absolutely. So, I'll say COVID for some industries, obviously has been crushing, particularly tourism and some of those related fields. I have some friends that, I have a good buddy of mine owns a owns a sign business and
Hmm.
just got crushed. Large format printing and services like menu boards for restaurants and
Oh man.
wraps and anything large format, and it was just crushing. He was down 85-90%, for his business in April and May. We saw to kind of give you some context. In 2019, we grew dramatically. We more than doubled sales, believe it or not, and we went from about 9 or 10 people to over 20 people for our team. So it's just a significant growth year for us. So going into 2020, we saw, we have very aggressive, goals with our budget. We were putting together lots of new initiatives to help us grow and scale. And we had a lot of big plans. And unfortunately, what happened. And,
Yeah.
we kind of saw an immediate, in mid-March, we started getting calls of, okay, let's go ahead and hit the pause button. Most of our fixed projects were still on. A lot of the clients that had kind of committed to the larger kind of projects that we already were underway, they were like, all right, well, we're not going to just stop. So we had that kind of base that was still gonna continue.
Yeah.
Anything related to digital marketing was pretty brutal. So April ended up being about 30% down. So it could have been a lot worse, but certainly not as bad as some of my friends in other industries. But the good news is April, we think was the bottom for us, and May's already on its way back up. We've been projecting out for the rest of the year, June, July,
And so
each.
you think you may be hiring again, basically, as you
Yeah,
get
I
more
think so.
projects and yeah.
Yeah. So what we did going into, so we expected to hire about 6 people this year, five or 6 people. Our budget for this year was going to be about 4.1 million in total revenue. We think we can keep things on track to do about 3.3 million in revenue.
Okay.
So, but for our type of business, since we were kind of in high growth mode, we were investing in lots of new things to help scale that we can now just say, okay, let's just pull back and hit pause on those investments. And, basically we're able to sort of absorb this loss in expected sales and kind of minimize, sort of the impact. And so really long term, I think our company will be fine. And I think a lot of companies that are sort of in our space will be just fine. I mean, I kind of see this as 2021 will be sort of the reset. Like, okay, everything we wanted to do in 2020, we'll now do it in 2021. And so we're kind of just staying the course and trying to get through this year without any additional major hiccups. But I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic for the future. One of the things that we did, so going into this year, we wanted to hire a senior level developer actually. And since COVID happened, we actually, instead of hiring it in-house, we just signed an agreement with a group out of Seattle where they have 36 developers, and they exist to provide support to creative agencies just like ours. So we're going to kind of use them, to help us with capacity and just kind of give us some additional developers that we can kind of flex their time when we need it. And we're going to, so our intent is to use them at least for the foreseeable future, maybe till the spring of 2021, we can kind of reassess things and then maybe bring on that developer that we had originally planned. So, but I'm very optimistic for this industry. I don't think it's going to get hit nearly as hard as others. And I think everything's on its way back up from my perspective. So.
Any thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, it's very similar. Brian and I kind of see the world very similarly. Very, very cautiously optimistic, but still optimistic about the future. Definitely, our industries are not going to get hit as hard as everybody else is getting hit. it's just the nature of it, right? I mean, digital, as a matter of fact, people who are right now, they are doing, for example, manufacturing. So our space is, we're very limited. We decided also a few years back that we do stuff most in the back end. You know, we do some things in the front end, but are not for their customers, our customers. And so the stuff we do is manufacturing, transportation, oil and gas. You know, those are kind of the primary industries that we work with. And we have others that we've done, not that we target them, but they have come to us, or a partner brings them to us. And we've seen how manufacturing, you know, one of our customers is Herman Miller. They got hit really bad because it's, you know, they're making chairs and cubicles, and there's, you can't be doing that when the, you know, the state closes down, you know, the business, right? And so you have very limited capability in the factory. You know, they were having trouble with supplies coming from other countries, you know, and so it's like, it's just normal, right? But on the other hand, Pure Later, you know, the Canadian Post is our customer too, and they're super busy. They're busier than ever. As a matter of fact, some of the stuff that like Walmart, other customers they have, are actually bringing more stuff to them. So we're building more things for them, right? And so we thought that we were gonna get hit bad because, just like Brian was saying, in March, people were like, you know, our sales pipeline went to zero, basically, you know. But our projects were not stopped. We were lucky that none of our customers stopped the projects that were going. But now, you know, March was bad, April was bad in terms of the pipeline. May started to pick up, and now in June we're seeing more. And so, you know, we have plans. So we were doing actually the same thing. We were just recalculating our projections, and our CEO and I were actually talking about this morning. It's like, well, it looks like we might still grow this year. And so it won't be the growth that we expected, but we're going to grow. And so we're going to hire a project manager and another senior developer. And we're actually opening two spots for two interns at the end of June. And so, so we're busy, you know, and so we're hoping that this stays this way, you know, so.
That's great to see. I think we've seen from our employer partners that there are essentially two kinds of people, you know, or maybe three. So some who are in industries that have been very negatively impacted. Some of those are unfortunately laying off and et cetera, furloughing, et cetera. I think there are other industries that are basically like, you know, let's do a pause, let's regroup, and then we'll start hiring again in a month or two while we are, you know, once we understand what the future needs are. And then there's a third group that's actually in need of more developers now because of, you know, the variables have changed, right? Any company that was serving some kind of online need. I mean, look at Zoom. We're on the Zoom platform itself. You know, it has suddenly become a household name when nobody knew about it. Like that, there are so many other companies that basically help us exist in this new world. And I think those companies are doing a lot of hiring. And so, you know, net, we're seeing that there are, you know, there was a decline during March, April in the number of job postings, but that they're basically coming back very strongly now. And, you know, I think, like I said earlier, what's nice about them is a lot of those positions are open to remote as well, which means that you can be elsewhere. So, you know, another change of topic to another kind of common conversation today, which is around diversity in technology. And I think that we as an industry have what's interesting about it is that there was a time where there was actually more diversity, and then at some point, maybe in the late 80s or something, it kind of started becoming a very one-way, whether it's gender diversity or racial diversity. We as an industry have struggled for many, many years and continue to do so. And so maybe we can, I don't know if which one of you wants to start, but I'd love to understand, like, what have you seen in your company? Like, what kind of efforts have been made in your company? What has worked for you? What are some ideas that you would have for other business leaders who are trying to diversify their companies more?
Yeah, sure. I'll start off that discussion, and it's a very obviously a very timely thing to talk about. So, You know, the thing I'll say is that first, our company's leadership is very aware that we need to do more in that area. You know, I think over the years, my kind of personal, you know, beliefs has been that of wanting to be inclusive and you know, culturally we've welcomed team members from all different walks of life and some of our you know, best employees are come from very diverse backgrounds. But it's, I think recently, in light of everything that's, you know, going on in our country right now, it's kind of creating some really healthy introspection and discussions amongst our leadership team, where we're saying, wow, you know, yeah, we think we have felt these things in our hearts before now. However, there is no formal, you know, written plan or strategy, you know, at this point for how we're going to deliberately ensure that that we're doing, you know, the best that we can in terms of you know, inclusion. So, you know, right now we're our company, you know, like I said, we're 23 people. You know, 34% are women, 26% are people of color, and 13% are in the LGBTQ community. So, so there's still work to be done there for sure. You know, I saw that even today, actually, there was an article I think it was in Adweek, I want to say, where mainly people in the creative fields, mainly it was designers from large ad agencies, basically put together a 12-point list of what their recommendations are to employers in the advertising industry, where it spells out very clearly, hey, this is what we want to see. So, you know, we're going to be taking a look at that. I know even simple steps that we're looking at, or I mean, I say simple steps, steps that are meaningful, that are tangible, where we can say, okay, this is something that we could really do. You know, one of those is, I know here locally they have Dialogue on Race, which is it's a 6-part series where it's I believe it's 2 hours each time, and you cover various topics, you know, related to that topic, including white privilege and implicit bias and many things kind of around that. And I've heard lots of great things about that. So, you know, that's one of the things that our leadership team is talking about. So all to say, we're very committed. And I think the discussions that are happening all over the country right now has kind of been a sort of a wake-up call for us to really be more deliberate and committed to paper on, you know, what is it that we're really going to do here. So, so we're excited.
That's really great to see. And, you know, another thing I'll say is that it's very commendable that you even knew those numbers of, you know, I think we always believe that you can't improve what you don't measure. Right. And so I think that's pretty commendable that you even, you know, knew those numbers. I don't know how many CEOs would be able to list those off. So I think that's great. Ian, you know, your team, I was doing some just kind of research on you guys, and you've been able to put together a very diverse team. And I think you yourself have you know, been, I mean, you're an immigrant, you've kind of, you came to this country without all these connections in tech or anything. You know, we'd love to hear some of your stories and what tips do you have for employers, and also if, you know, do you have any tips for if you are a person of color, kind of looking at your chances in the job market, how do you succeed, and what are some practical tips?
Yeah, you know, I think for me, you know, and for us, we have a pretty diverse team. We don't have yet anybody in our team who's LGBTQ QT, you know, from this group, because it just hasn't happened that we actually haven't even had anybody who's applied Timber Grove, but we actually, it's funny, my son is gay, and so and so we're always talking about what do we do about that in the workplace, right? And so when we post, which actually we're just posting this week a job opening for a project manager, we talk about he, she, or theirs, right? So we talk about, we want to make sure that when people apply, know that we are open to anything of that, and
Yeah.
that is part of a. And if you're applying to Timber Grove and you're not open to that, you're probably going to be uncomfortable. and so we even put it on our job applications, because we feel it's not the first time that we've done it, and because it's part of life, right? I mean, so for us it's no difference, right? And so for our diversity is more, we're about 27% are women in our team, and about 33% are people of color, and so to me it's more about the ethos, in terms of you have if you're able to, if you're motivated, you have the basic knowledge, right, that comes from your whatever degree you have, right? Because we don't only have software engineers, we have all sorts of professions, right? And so you have the basic knowledge, you are a person that can communicate, right? They can demonstrate an emotional an EQ that is relatable, that it allows you to have workout problems. I think that's the biggest blocker that we see, is that people come thinking that everything is going to be either rosy or I am perfect or they're perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. And so
Yeah.
there's going to be conflict. We're going to see the world from very different, even brothers and sisters from the same parents see the world a very different way, right? So you just have to figure out that how do you get around that? How do you get past the blockages, right? And how do you move on to deliver what as a company you're supposed to be doing, which is adding value to your customers, right? And how do you do that in a way that life is not miserable, right? I mean, life is too short to be miserable in a job, right? With the team that you are, or and what we found out is that it's not even pay what it motivates people 100%. Obviously, you have to pay a competitive rate, but it's more about the type of team, how you allow people to have flexibility in their schedule, how to you can't be supervising them and over the shoulder constantly. And so what we try to do is have a culture of acceptance and openness. And I tell my whole team is like, people are no longer telling me I'm going to be out from 2 to 6. They're just gone. And where do you go? I don't care. You can go to a gym. It's like, and we have made that a part of the culture. There's not an 8 to 5 here, because sometimes we have team members in Singapore. Sometimes we're meeting at 10 p.m. Right? It's just a matter of, well, you then balance your life. Go do your groceries at 2 p.m. right, or
Yeah.
go to the gym at 4 p.m. Who cares? So as long as you feel comfortable with that, and you can fit in this culture, right? We use something called EOS to analyze people. It's called the you get it, you want it, and you can do the work, right? And so if you can fit those three descriptions, then you're gonna be in the right seat in the bus, So for me, whether is a matter of whether it's racial, whether it's any other parameter, for me, it's more about, is that person willing and able to work out through issues, and can he do it in a way that is amiable and constructive, And so once we get to that point, we don't care who the person is in many ways. And actually, we love to have people of different racial backgrounds. We have people from India, from Ukraine, from Costa Rica. We have people from in multiple countries. I am from Honduras. There was a point we had an office in Mexico, and in Mexico there were people from multiple countries, Colombia, Guatemala, and so
Yeah.
we're pretty diverse in that sense, and we welcome that diversity, and we try to promote it as well. So.
Yeah, I think that that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things you said, Brian, that has resonated with a lot of leaders in tech is that the awareness that has been created has been a wake-up call for a lot of people that we need to do more, and that we need to really think about, can we put our money where our mouth is, and really make a difference, because it's a shame, honestly, that I even think about it as, okay, forget all the virtue signaling of like, let's be diverse or not, but like, if you're not selecting out of the entire population, you are also not selecting out of the out of all the smart people in the country, right? So like if let's just take gender diversity for a second. Like if all your engineers are men, that means you've only selected out of half of the country's smart people, right? It's like you're in a sense it's a big loss to the industry to not be diverse. And so I think even if you just look at it from a self-interest, I think that we should be trying our best to ensure that there's equal opportunity everywhere for people to make it. And so I think and of course, I mean, I think at the company level, mentorship is important, for people who are new to the field and people who don't have a lot of connections, and also just education at the earlier levels is also important. So, thanks to both of you for sharing your background and stories on that. So now I'd love to open it up to our audience for some question and answer. And I know that we've had a number of questions come up on the chat. And I'm happy to go through those if you'd like, or if others want to add. We also have a Q&A function on the bottom of your Zoom. So if you want to use that Q&A, sometimes that can be a bit better because it can make sure that your question is kind of highlighted and not lost in the larger chat. And so so feel free to do that. I'll actually zoom up a little bit to see. So I'm just going to see if I can find any good questions here to ask about. Wow, there's been a really interesting chat here while we were all chatting. Okay, here we have a question in the Q&A. As the computer science field changes at a quick rate, academia seems behind with the times in the real world. How does the bootcamp program or bootcamp programs compare to the real world requirements? I would say, Robert, that this question is very interesting. I think the computer science field, I would actually say in the other sense, like computer science field doesn't change very frequently. Like at least the theoretical computer science field doesn't change at all, which is why a lot of times academia doesn't feel like changing their curriculum at all. But what does change all the time is the real world. And I think that's one of the places where boot camps can come in, because we can change our curriculum very, very quickly and ensure that what we're teaching kind of mirrors the market. Like we want to know what Brian and Ian are doing and what kind of people they're hiring, so that we can train people with those skills. And I'm curious, actually, both of the panelists also, how do you keep your own engineers trained? And, do you have some kind of, some kind of cycle of training that's kind of built in so that people can learn new technologies as they continue their employment?
So for us at Timberger, what we do is we have every engineer has a week of training that is, we allow them to select a program that it's in any field of technology that could be utilized in the company. And obviously it's very broad, right? So some people have chosen data science, some have chosen machine learning. Some of us have just gone for something related to a specific framework with like React, React Native. Some people wanted to do that. Somebody actually who did not have a computer science degree wanted to go and take this camp. That was it was 3 days of kind of like algorithms, and a more computer science background and learning patterns, and things like that. So every year people go for different things. Sometimes some of them sometimes choose to go to like AWS, conference, and go take tests, that get certified. Some people actually, we had last year 3 people who were going through a certification program. We purchased the packages for them to take the classes for AWS certification, and they took like 9 months to do it, and they all took the test and passed. And so we have a bunch of certified AWS people. So
Great.
it's not we're small companies, so we don't have like a program, but what we have is we give the space. We said you have 1 week at a year that you can go. We pay for the training. We give you the time off. And depending how far it is and how expensive it is. So some people want to go to Amsterdam. It's like, well, you pay for Amsterdam. We pay you for the training when you get there, right? And so, and
Yeah.
it's different things. There was actually one of the developers he was new, and he went to do a camp a week in a beach in Mexico. There's a bunch of developers, and there was a guy who used to be an instructor in a boot camp, and they did some like a hackathon on the beach, and so he took
Oh,
a
cool.
week to go and do that. And so, we just pay him for the airfare and the hotel. It was super cheap because it was like, it was in the beach, and we were sharing a house, so stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm
kind of
sure
what we do.
my wife would learn that. My wife would love that. I would be on the beach coding, and she could be actually enjoying the beach.
Yeah. So I mean, we're not very formal, but that's kind of what we offer.
Yeah. What about you guys, Brian?
Yeah, so for any new developers that that kind of started our company, I think right away a lot of the training is kind of job shadowing, learning from the more senior developers and that sort of thing. But really developing a complete training program is actually one of the big initiatives for 2020. I see it as kind of a differentiator during the hiring process. The real sharp applicants are going to ask, "Hey, what opportunities are you going to give me? Working here to continue to learn." And when they ask that question, I want to have a very clear answer.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're looking at is a complete program that would have 4 components to it. One would be kind of in-person kind of local opportunities, local events, things like that. And that one's a little bit harder to plan for. It feels a little more kind of random, but that is some of it. 2 would be out of market conferences and seminars that we would commit dollars to. 3 would be custom facilitated training so meaning we would hire a third party to come in and train on a particular topic. I think for that it's going to it's a little bit harder sometimes to find with coding and some of the specific things that we'd be looking for. So I think a lot of times that would be around leadership development, more soft skills, things like that. And then the 4th would be custom online curriculums that we kind of develop. And so really my goal is to kind of take every person in the company and say, okay, at the start of the year, hey, this is your custom plan. These are the soft skills that we'd love to see you develop. In order to develop that, you'll go to these sessions here locally, facilitated by this outside group. Here's some other thing. Maybe there's if you're a developer, maybe okay, it's go to this website. You now have an account. You're going to go through these X number of training videos and whatnot. So, but basically be able to communicate that across every single position at our company and really thoughtfully put together a plan, for each one of those people. So it's a tall order. It's it's a commitment from the budget for sure. So trying to kind of balance all that and but it's something we're pretty serious about. So we've made some headway with it. In full disclosure, we're not, we don't have it all figured out by any means, but we know that training is a big deal moving forward. So,
Yeah, I think that that's good to see. A lot of times when we have employer partners who want to hire out of our bootcamp programs, a lot of times I ask them whether, is your company kind of ready to hire a bootcamp graduate if you're only used to hiring, experienced grads. I think, the main thing that a manager has to know is that you have to set up the person you hire for success, right? So you have to have some kind of mentoring in place to give them a nice ramp up. I guarantee you after 6, 9, 12 months, you're going to be happy as hell that you hired this person because you'll find somebody who's humble, smart, and a hard worker. But you have to set up the company so that you can actually help them succeed. I think that's that's what I've seen happen in the employers that are the most successful. hiring a lot of bootcamp grads. And then, those people keep coming back, actually, the people who have figured out how to do it well. So we have another question from Eddie around how does doing a bootcamp compare to CompTIA certifications, or really just certifications in general? I think that's an interesting, it's an interesting question. I think certifications, for those of you who are not familiar, a lot of times for specific technologies, there are companies like CompTIA or other companies who will have certification exams that you can take. And if you pass those exams, you'll be given a certain certification. Certifications are popular in fields like DevOps or cybersecurity, or a few other fields that are very popular. In coding itself, they're not as popular, actually, and I think they're not as required even. I would say that, I know that, for example, back in the day when I was writing Java, Java had a certification that I spent a lot of time studying for, and taking the exam. And then I realized that actually in software, because it's so easy for the company to test your skills in an interview itself, they don't really need a certification as much. They can just see the evidence that what you've built, and then in the interview they can ask you technical questions, and it's very easy to know whether you are qualified or not. On the other hand, like, my wife is a physician, and they take so many exams and so many, because it's very hard, just in a small seating, to know whether, like, they have comprehensive knowledge of all the things that they need to know. And so the certification is very important in that field. So I would say, to get to your question, is that, boot camps don't prepare you for any specific certification. I would just say they prepare you for the certification of, the streets of the so-called coding streets, which is just that you just have a lot of evidence to employers that you know how to build stuff, and that you have built a bunch of projects that you can show and you can demo. And I think that's the best thing you can have, like, that's even better than certifications, if you can show evidence of what you've built. And so, yeah. Any other thoughts on that from the Brian or Ian?
I
No, I
agree.
mean, I'll say that, Nimit, I think you're dead on there. I mean, a lot of times when I'm interviewing, aside from all the soft skills and culture fit and core values and all those things, really I'm looking for, did this person give it a shot? Show me something that you've built, or show me that you've tried to learn a particular language, and sometimes it could be super simple. Show me some WordPress theme template that you at least got to function correctly, or a web flow or something. It can be something not terribly fancy, but it's just about you cared enough to spend your own time trying to figure this out, and that goes a long way. So
yeah. And it seems like that question was from somebody who is interested in cybersecurity, which I mentioned. So I think there is actually, and so in cybersecurity, I think certifications are more looked at. At Full Stack, we do, we don't specifically do certification only training, but for example, we will do some training in both blue team and red team, which will be, it just gives you some background for kind of the basic certifications that are out there, like Security Plus or OSCP or things like that. And so, and we have many of our graduates who go on to get those certifications after they graduate. Okay, so we have another question from Robert. Several different roles were mentioned, like designer, developer, and coder. What skills differentiate all these various roles? I don't know if either of you want to take that.
Sure, I'll take a stab. So the designers normally are, so there are two types of designers: the technical designers, and you have the the UX UI designers, right? So people who manage the what is called the user experience of the products. And probably Brian can talk more about that part. But we also have designers who are technical. So for us architects, you know, because we work with systems that are quite disparate, very large, and we normally integrate with a lot of platforms and companies. And so, so we have somebody who has to technically design how we're going to integrate data across, how data is going to be managed, the life cycle of the data itself, security permissions, things of that nature, right? How applications are able to interact with each other. And so it's a lot of design work that goes in there. So the word design is, you know, could be referred to technical design, or it could be referred to, you know, the user experience, right? The developers or coders, which are interchangeable words, at least for us, they also do a little bit of design before they start writing code. You know, you have to think a little bit in paper or in your head. We emphasize a lot of think before, you know, write, even if it's half a page, you know, do doodles in you know, in your notebook, whatever, but think through it before you start coding. And so there's, you know, the coders, developers, software engineers, whatever you want to call them, we use those words interchangeably, you know. So I don't know, Brian, how do you guys?
Yeah, no, that's about right for us as well. You know, I'd say in our world, designer typically is more graphics, you know, oriented. When we say that word, it's, you know, usually it's in that context. So it's actually what you would see on a website. A lot of times is what a designer is controlling. And then, but yeah, I would agree with what Ian said on everything else in terms of developers, coders, software engineers, you know.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the skills. Did he mention skills? Yeah, skills. So you know, the skill set, right? So the developers, coders, software engineers are people who are versed in programming languages, frameworks. You know, depending what you're doing. If you're doing web development, you know, like WordPress, for example, you have to understand the WordPress framework itself, right? You have to understand PHP, which is the programming language that it's in which WordPress in the framework is built. And you know, for depending on what application you're building, like, you know, we build applications mostly on the front end side on Angular or React. Very seldomly we write native applications, and if we do, we actually use something called React Native or Ionic, which is our platforms. But the language would be JavaScript, right? The platform probably is Angular or React.
Yeah.
And then you gotta learn some foundations about programming, you know, sorting algorithms. You gotta learn how to do how to access a database, right? How to write files, how to read files, how to manipulate the data in the screen, you know, things of that nature. So those are the skills per se on the software developer versus the UI designer, right? The user interface is more of a, you got to learn how to manipulate images, how to play with fonts, right? And how to space things appropriately, and colors, and, you know, how to use Photoshop, how do you use, you know, Illustrator, things of that. It's a very different set of tools, you know, and skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's you know, they are both different in a sense, but what's really interesting is that we actually have people who are from the design world who also come to learn coding, and they do that because, you know, that can be a pretty, I think of it as like it's like a pretty lethal combination, right? If you're a really good designer and you're a good coder, like anybody will want to hire you. And you know, it's just rare to find that kind of a mix. And so yeah, I think there's increasing space for both to exist. And in fact, I see designers now learning more and more code. You know, I see very often now that designers are very good at least HTML and CSS, so they can convert their designs into just front end interfaces. And so, yeah. So yeah, would love to answer any other questions. Anybody else have a question for us? Otherwise, uh, I can chime in. I always have a lot of questions. So I guess I also have uh, a question, which is, do you in your company, do you hire separate roles for front end and back end? um, and if yes, then why, and why not? I see trends kind of both ways. There was a moment where everybody was hiring full stack engineers, and then now, now as front end has gotten more kind of powerful, I think we have more specialization. So where's your company? And then also, what's some of the tech that you guys are using? Like, Brian told us about WordPress, and Ian, you mentioned Ionic or React Native. Like, would love to hear more about your tech stack as well.
Want to go first, Ryan?
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
You. Okay.
Oh yeah. All right. So well, we throw everybody to front end first because it's kind of thrown onto the water. If they can swim, they stay. If they can't, they're gonna drown, right? And so we throw them
Yeah.
2 to 3 weeks, and it's very evident who is a front end developer because it's a personality. You kind of have to be OCD, and you have to like tweaking things, and it's all about how it looks. Backend developers don't give a crap, pardon my French, about a pixel here and a font here, and it shows because it looks horrible on the screen, right? And so
Yeah.
so front developers to me are like a very peculiar, and we kind of can tell a little bit when they come in who are front end and who are not, to be quite honest. But either way, we throw them into the fire, and whoever is a backend developer, it's gonna come very clear because they're gonna be screaming, and they're just gonna be miserable the whole time they're doing this, and their work is gonna show that they're not front end developers, and vice versa. When we have somebody who's front end and they're doing back end, they treat it the same way. They're very peculiar and meticulous about the details, and it's like, oh goodness gracious. So it's you have to have on the right seat on the bus, because otherwise everybody's miserable, including people working with them. So yeah, so front end, we really separate them very early on, so.
Makes sense.
Ian, that's hysterical. Yeah, very true. I mean, we very much live in the front end, side of things. The vast majority of our projects, just don't go deep enough to where we really need any, senior level back end, coders. So again, all of our stuff is, it's CSS, WordPress, PHP, JavaScript. If the developer has a strong understanding in those areas, then normally we're good to go. So but yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the other tools. I know for us, we it's interesting. The Nimit's completely right about the sort of the hybrid designer developer unicorn, that will come along.
That's a good word, unicorn. That's right.
So sometimes, and we've had some at our company like that over the years, but by and large, we typically kind of separate it as, okay, you're the super creative graphics person. You're going to come up with the look and feel of this project. And then you're the front end developer. You still have an appreciation for details and making sure things are pixel perfect, but your goal here is really to work on things under the hood. Don't get into colors and fonts and images and things like that, and we kind of keep those roles separate. Now, of course, they're very collaborative, and they all work together and make sure they're communicating, but for the most part, they're kind of in their own lanes, and then we have a series of tools that that they use. I know for prototyping, we use a system called Envision, which allows us to quickly create wireframes and be able to pitch it to clients and kind of show the vision for a project. And then, I'm drawing a blank on Envision. And then oh man, I'm drawing a blank on our core kind of system. You know, so it used to be Photoshop. You know, you would create, you know,
Sketch. You're talking about Sketch.
yeah,
Sketch.
Sketch. Exactly. Sketch. So between Envision and Sketch, you know, those are two key pieces of software that we use every day. But so anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's great to hear. It's I think the tools of development themselves have gotten so much better over the years.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredible how much you can do in a low amount of time. But I think that also means actually, I mean, I love it when the simple stuff gets disrupted in a sense, because that means that you know, the developers kind of have to move up the value chain and do more interesting things, and you know, build just, you know, just use their skills to build more complicated stuff. Whereas, right, like I'm sure, Brian, when you started, it was all just basic websites, and you know, and actually we used to call them web pages then, not web apps.
You're showing your age, Nimit. What's going on there, man? I thought you were younger. What's going on?
I thought my hair shows my age a little bit. I'm trying to, sometimes I try to keep it down a little bit to show that I still got some. I don't know, like you can tell us what your hair secret is, Ian. You've
Yeah, look at this. Oh, that's the white. Oh, you're talking about hair out of
yeah, I'm talking about that. So
it's
so
glue.
anyway,
It's glue.
so um so anyway, thank you both. I think we've you know, we've had a great discussion here. We just hit 9 o'clock, which is where our session was supposed to go till. So thank you both for taking a part in this great discussion, and thank you to all of our participants who had some great conversations, and thank you for the questions as well. If you do need more information about the LSU Bootcamp specifically, we will follow up with an email. I think you can go to I think it's bootcamp.lsu.edu, and but probably it's not the smartest to read off URLs in words. It's better to get links in writing. So we'll get you a link. And yeah, we hope to see you in a bootcamp. If you have any questions, always feel free to contact us. And thank you to all of you who participated. And thank you again to Brian and Ian.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Okay,
Yep. Take care. Good
Bye.
night, you guys, everybody.